Yesterday, we were talking about this young man with whom we were talking about being caught up between two preceptors or teachers. Preceptor as regards the teaching of Dhamma and preceptor as regards the teaching of Vinaya, the rules of conduct for monks. So much so that he was suffering. He was suffering so much that he could not even dare stretch his arms. So he decided to revert to lay life. However, when he came to the Buddha gave him the teachings in this way. Buddha said that, of course, it will be difficult for you to control many things, because if you don't control your mind also, you will be committing unprofitable deeds, and at the same time, if you are not being able to practice Vinaya, you will not be able to control your physical, verbal behaviors. So you are caught between two things. So how about controlling just one thing? Could you guard just one thing and leaving the rest? And that the young man was very much relieved, because initially he was in a great difficulty, caught up between these two teachers. So he was glad that he could guard just one thing. So he asked the Buddha what was that one thing to be guarded. And the Buddha said that if you just guard the mind, you will be able to achieve your purpose of freedom from suffering. And in this way, the Buddha gave him a hope to realize his purpose by giving this verse in Dhammampada, which we said yesterday, Suddhodasam Sunipunam Yatha Kama Nipatinam Chaitam Rakheta Medavi Chaitam Gautam Sukha Maham. Meaning, the mind is very difficult to perceive, very delicate and subtle. It moves and lands wherever it pleases. The wise should guard one's mind, for a guarded mind brings happiness. In this verse, there are three parts, namely the first part, which gives the nature of the mind. The Buddha mentions the nature of the mind in the first part. In the second part, the Buddha mentioned to guard the mind, that is the practice to guard the mind. In the third part, he mentions the results that one can achieve by guarding the mind, the benefit of the practice. Now, as regards the first part of this verse, beginning with the Suddhodasam Sunipunam, it means, the Buddha says that the mind is difficult to perceive. That means that in the case of a solid matter, one can see it because it has color or appearance. And then you can feel it, such as if you feel the body, you can feel the bones which are hard, hardness of the bones, and if you feel the flesh, you will feel the softness of the flesh, and also you will feel the weather conditions, temperature conditions, such as heat, warmth, cold, and other sensations such as lightness, heaviness, which are very obvious, and so are these sensations such as stiffness, tension and movement. They are quite obvious. You can feel the three great essentials, namely Prithvi, Tejo, Vaya, earth element, temperature element, and wind element, except the water element, the element of cohesion. Hence, they are not included in this Suddhodasa. That means they can be perceived. They are not difficult to perceive. Whereas in the case of the mind, it is difficult to perceive because they're very delicate and subtle. Just as when the yogis are practicing and cultivating knowledge, when they reach the higher level of insight knowledge, they might not feel the mind, or they might feel or not feel the mind, the presence of the mind, so subtle and delicate is the mind at that moment. Hence, the mind travels wherever it pleases, as is given by this expression, Yata Kama Nipatina. It moves and lands wherever it pleases, irrespective of or without regard to one's status, age, occupation, or condition. It lands wherever it pleases, because one is not able to control the mind. If the mind is not guarded, it will go anywhere it likes. If you leave the mind uncontrolled, give freedom to the mind, it will go anywhere it likes. And such kind of mind is bound to become unprofitable, unwholesome, like leaving the children uncontrolled, they may become delinquent. So too with the mind. If the mind is not controlled, that means it will become worse. It will become unprofitable. It is difficult to perceive. It is delicate and subtle. It lands wherever it pleases. If, however, you guard it, that is, if you guard the mind, as it happens, like noting, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, as it is, noting, rising and falling and so on, then you'll be able to guard the mind. And this guarded mind will bring happiness, as is given by this expression, Chaitam Rekhena Medavi, who guards the mind. The wise guards the mind. That is wise, given by this expression, Medavi. By knowing the nature of the mind, one is guarding the mind, or one is controlling the mind. Such a person is called Medavi, the wise. Knowing the method of controlling the mind and having desire or desirous to control it, one decides to control it through it. Such a person will be listed as Medavi, a wise. As quite such a man is a reasonable person. If one practices in this way, guard the mind, then you'll be able to control it. Whereas it goes without saying that an unreasonable person, unwise person, or a stupid or foolish person will not have the ability to guard his or her mind. And if it's left uncontrolled, then it will go anywhere it likes, bringing about loss and suffering and ultimate destruction. If one ends one's life or with old age disease. And if one is able to control it, one will end one's life with good benefit. On the other hand, if one cannot control one's mind and dies, then one is not dying in a good way. So the Buddha said that Buddha told this young man to control one thing, that is to guard the mind. And what is the benefit of the mind? The benefit of the mind is happiness, as is given by this expression, Chaitam Gautam Sukhavaham. For a guarded mind brings happiness. If one is able to control it, one will become secure and one will realize peace and happiness, being free from the impurities which are tormenting, destructive and afflicting. And even for the practitioners, for the yogis, during the time of their practice, they will be able to overcome such afflictive emotions on a part-time basis, because they are practicing this Purana path known as Pubbabhaga Megana. They are able to extinguish these impurities on a part-time basis. And at the maturity of the practice of the insight knowledge, if they are able to realize the path consciousness, they will be able to eradicate these impurities to the point of no return. In this way, you will realize happiness of the path consciousness. And this path consciousness is followed by fruition consciousness, by which the impurities are further extinguished. Then you will gain this fruition happiness. And lastly, that happiness of Nibbana. And this is how you will be brought about, or you will reach this stage of happiness. And the Buddha revealed the benefit of controlling the mind. And at the end of the discourse, the young man at once practiced in accordance with the Buddha's teachings and realized the first supramundane path. And others who listened to this discourse also were able to realize the supramundane consciousness, and they were able to gain the benefit of the discourse. That was how the text has shown. Coming back to the four-wheeled prosperity, Sampatti, we have this third of this four-wheeled prosperity, namely Atta Samappanidi, will be explained to some extent, but not yet fully. As we have already said, this Atta of Atta Samappanidi is taken as the mind. And Samma, rightly, Panidi, keeping or conducting. So Atta Samappanidi means conducting one's mind in the right way. This is how it is glossed. Then if we shape the mind, we control the mind, or we conduct the mind in the right way, then we will be shaping and molding other things. If we control the mind, the physical behaviors will also become properly shaped. So will be the verbal behaviors. It will become beautiful. Hence, Atta is taken as the mind in the main, which is also mentioned in this verse as the mind, Chitta. That is, one should guard one's mind. And how to guard this mind is to be understood. Here the Buddha admonished in a brief way, if all the details are given here, then this verse will become very inflated, very big in quantity, in size. So we have to talk about the method of controlling the mind from other texts. Here the Buddha takes the main thing, namely the mind, which is most important. If one guards the mind, then physical and the body and speech will automatically be guarded. So the Buddha told this young man to guard the mind. By guarding the mind, others also will be accomplished. His purpose also will be accomplished. In this way, the Buddha encouraged this young man. As regards the method of guarding or controlling, we'll have to talk about it, taken from other sources. It is being given in this text known as Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length saying, the 10 ways of the 10 factors of an Aryan home, Ariyavasa. That is the home of the noble and pure individuals. One of the factors among these 10, or one of the qualities, is this. That is, what is the one way of guarding the mind, or how should the monk possess one way of guarding the mind? That was the Buddha asked the question. Now, as for the one who guards the mind, who is supposed to guard the mind, is known as a bhikkhu or yogi, who fears the dangers of samsara, and bhikkhu or yogi, who is destroying the impurities. So such person is known as a bhikkhu or yogi. And how should a bhikkhu or yogi do to guard one's mind? And what is one way of guarding the mind? That was the question. So in this case, the monks or yogis means those who fear the dangers of rounds of rebirths, or yogis or bhikkhus who are destroying the impurities, kilesas. And how would one possess a sure way of guarding one's mind? That is the question. Just like a person who is living a high level life of high level standard, he or she should have a guard to guard his or her house. So too in the case of a pure and noble person, he or she should be guarded by one sure way of guarding one's mind. And what is this way? That was the question, and the Buddha answered the question by himself. Meaning, saying that monks in this dispensation, one should possess a mind guarded by the vigilant mindfulness. That was the answer given. Satareke nachidasa. That is, one's mind should be guarded with mindfulness, with the application of mindfulness. This should be the means of guarding the mind. Sampanagato, one should be fulfilled, or one should possess a mind which is guarded by mindfulness. That was the answer to this question. The answer also was given by the Buddha. And this expression from this verse, namely, Citam Rekkena Medavi. As regards Medavi, to what extent should one be wise? That is the question. One should not take it too highly, a high sense of this meaning, That is, as regards the meaning of Medavi, the wise. As we have said, one should fear, as a bhikkhu or yogi, one should fear the dangers of samsara, because if one goes on existing from one existence to another, it is not going to be satisfactory. Although at one time it may be good existence, one will not be free from this existential suffering of old age, disease and death. As long as one has the body, one is bound to suffer. One is bound to suffer as regards the body, because of the body. As long as one has the mind, one is bound to suffer because of the mind. And it is not going to be satisfactory. So life has much suffering with little peace and happiness. Especially when one is doing deeds, if one is afraid, one will be afraid of realizing the consequences of unprofitable deeds, misconduct. One is afraid of it. When one is afraid of it, this means dosa, a sunken form of anger. It is a kind of anger or ill will. It is accompanied with fear. So, bhikkhu, as a bhikkhu, one will be afraid of the consequences of unwholesome deeds, and one will be aroused by a sense of urgency and enthusiasm known as samvega, because of this fear. Then, if one fears, then one is said to be a wise person. So, one approaches a teacher to be free from suffering, and one will go in pursuit of the method to be free from suffering. First of all, one hears the method from the teacher. One will wish to get this method first and foremost. Then one will practice the 3 trainings. And by practicing, one will realize the benefit of the practice. If one does not practice, then one will be overcome by these afflictive emotions, which are of 3 grades, namely gross, medium and refined. Now, with the practice of these 3 trainings, they have no chance of arising in you. And by not giving a chance, you are said to be winning victory over them. You are said to be destroying them. As such, you become Medavi, a wise. And moreover, if you are able to activate mindfulness and progress along the path of insight, you will be able to realize an unusual experience. Then you become very successful in your practice. In the beginning, you will be a Medavi, but not so strong or powerful Medavi as yet. By just seeing the danger in samsara, you are a Medavi. Then you practice to be free from the suffering of rounds of existence. Then you become a Medavi. And this expression, as given by the Buddha, Saddha Rekena Chittasa, that means Saddha, Sati and Areka. Saddha Rekena is divided into Sati and Areka. That is guarding the mind. Guarding is activating mindfulness, or noting every arising, or noting whatever arises. And this Sati, mindfulness, is a means of guarding one's mind. And a bhikkhu or yogi should possess this means of guarding the mind. Hence the expression Citta Samanagato. Citta Samanagato. One should possess this kind of mind. And how to possess this? That is, by activating mindfulness of whatever arises continuously, which is given by this expression, Saddha Rekina. And the bhikkhu or yogi should possess a mind guarded by mindfulness. That is as good as saying, one should guard one's mind with vigilant mindfulness of whatever arises. At this point, it would be proper to talk about the qualities of sati, mindfulness, in terms of natural characteristics, lakkhana, function, rasa, and manifestation, paccupatthana, so that one will understand the meaning of sati. Now, sati is given as abhilapana, lakkhana sati. That means sati, mindfulness, is characterized as abhilapana. That is, when the object arises, it is not in a way of floating on the object as characteristic. It is characterized as not floating on the surface of the object. And that goes without saying, it should sink into the object as the object arises obviously. That means one should note in such a way as to penetrate or sink into the object of attention. Just as when a cork is thrown to the water, then because it is light, it will float on the water, on the surface of the water. Whereas if you throw a stone into the water, it will sink where it is thrown. It will sink into the water. So too with the practice of mindfulness, one should activate mindfulness so that your noting mind appears to sink into the object of attention. Such is the meaning of this expression. As the object arises obviously, you activate mindfulness so that your noting mind will sink into the object like a stone thrown into the water. Sometimes when you note rising, your noting mind notes the rising object as though it sinks into this object of rising. And when falling takes place, as soon as falling takes place, you note it so that the noting mind seems to sink into the falling object. Such is given as the natural characteristic of sati. The next quality of sati is its function, namely asamosa rasa. Asamosa is the reverse of samosa, or samosa is the reverse of asamosa. Samosa means losing sight of the object, or forgetting the object. So its reverse is asamosa, that is not losing sight of, or not forgetting. Whenever an object arises, you don't lose it, you don't lose sight of it, you don't forget it, you don't fail to note it. So you note in such a way as to occupy or grasp all objects as they arise by activating your mindfulness, so as not to forget or lose sight of it or failing to note it. And yogis also should behave in this manner in the practice of meditation, to note every arising object, not to lose sight of it. And in order not to lose sight of it, one should apply energetic aim as the auxiliaries or as the helping factors of the deep mindfulness. And then one should have this desire to activate mindfulness, and in the course of mindfulness also, one should be able to apply these helping factors, namely energy and aim, the power of focusing, and the power of exertion of energy. And with these factors, you will be able to help or strengthen the power of sati. Then you will not lose sight of the object to be noted, and you become so that your mindfulness will be consistent, by which you will be able to sink your noting mind into the object, as is characterized by the quality of sati. When one is noting, watching whatever arises in the body and noting an object of attention, you will observe these objects rising one by one, like a line of objects, a line of variety of objects. And also in one variety also there will be one variety also be made up of many small tiny objects which flow like a current. And though it is just one variety, it is flowing, it is continuously flowing, and as it flows continuously, and the noting mind also must follow these objects to note them, as well as not to lose sight of this flow of objects. As one is activating mindfulness in this way, then the mindfulness is activating continuously as regards obvious objects as they arise. Then it goes without saying that your noting mind will be face to face with the object to be noted. It will be directly in front of it. Such will be manifested in the mind of the yogi, which is given by this expression, Vijaya Dunukha Bhava Pachupatana. The manifestation, sati has the manifestation of coming into face to face with the object of attention. Then yet another manifestation of sati runs in this way. As one's noting mind becomes face to face, comes into face to face with the object of attention, and as the practice becomes very consistent, the mind is said to be protected from the impurities, kilesas, saying as much as to oneself, alas, my mind is protected by sati. Sati is protecting my stream of consciousness, so as to not to allow these impurities from arising. And such is given by this expression, Areka Pachupatana, the manifestation of protection. So the proximate cause for this sati is given as Tira Sanya Padatana, a proximate cause of steadfast perception or recognition or recording. That means steadfast or strong, fixed recording of objects becomes the nearest cause for the activation of mindfulness. Recording every arising in the body as it arises, and such is how one records whether the object is good or bad. Like recording your tape, you record good or bad sound in the tape. So do with the yogis, as they are watching the body and every arising object in the body, they record every arising object, good or bad, and as the mindfulness, sati, becomes consistent, and as the noting mind will become face to face with the object of attention, you will be protected from impurities. This we shall continue tomorrow.